Welcome to It's What Our Characters Would Do, the podcast where a neutral good ranger and a chaotic neutral warlock talk about RPGs, roll funny dice, and give away some sweet loot. I'm Bob World Builder.
And I'm Grace World Destroyer.
And today we're talking about alternate combat objectives. And we're giving away a mystery dice set from Only Crits. But first, Grace, how are you feeling today?
Ooh, my brain has been put through a blender.
Oh boy, it sounds unpleasant.
Yeah.
What happened to your brain?
Work, you know.
I mean, I know.
Do I complain too much about work in this section?
We usually do it right after you get home from work.
That is true. Yeah.
We could try to go back to recording these on the weekend if I remember before.
I don't think we really have time on the weekends either, you know?
We have plenty of time on the weekends nowadays.
Yeah.
Like this particular weekend, we're about to go traveling. It's Gen Con, but we're not going there. We have some friends getting married this weekend, so we'll be in New England.
Way up there.
On a hill even, way up.
Way up in New England. At a high elevation.
At a high altitude wedding. It's extreme. But yeah, besides this weekend, I feel like we could normally record on the weekend. Like we got some chores, you prep, but like you can take 45 minutes to record a podcast episode.
That's true. We could do that. And then I wouldn't have blender brain when we record the podcasts.
Yeah. But hey, maybe blender brain is good for the audience. I don't know. Leave a comment below.
Leave a comment if you want to hear me complain about work when Bob asks me how I'm feeling.
Maybe I should change the question instead of how you feeling, because we'll know it's always blender brain. But wow, I can speak. I should just ask, what's cool, Daddy-o? And then you'll have a cooler answer for that.
Maybe.
Because no one could say blender brain. I mean, blender brain does sound kind of cool if you don't know what it is, I guess.
It's not cool.
Right. Well, I've been feeling pretty cool. I mean, well, it's mixed. As you know, because we've talked about it. YouTube views just weirdly seem like low this summer, but in talking to a bunch of creator friends, that seems to be like kind of across the board. So even though my brain is like, number small equal bad, like for some reason that's what's going on with everybody. And what other folks were saying is like this is kind of the first summer now in several years that folks are just doing everything they would normally do in a summer. Even last summer was like mostly normal, I think, for folks. This summer, it's like full on 100% back to norm for like 99% of people.
COVID is dead.
I guess. Yeah, so people are out and about. They're not stuck on their screens like I need them to be.
That or they're playing Baldur's Gate, which when did you say is coming out?
No, it comes out tomorrow.
Never mind. They will be playing Baldur's Gate.
They're about to be playing Baldur's Gate. But Baldur's Gate is not the topic of this episode. So I think we're ready to talk about the actual topic of this episode. And first we'll try to summarize it in 3d6 words or less. Why don't you roll?
12.
This episode covers combat encounters that also have other objectives. And I have 2 other words left, but I don't need them.
To do.
Yeah. To complete.
I think we should challenge ourselves more with this. I think we should say it has to be 3d6 words.
Just use whatever the roll is?
Yeah.
Well, the thing is that usually the roll is more than we need, right?
Exactly.
Maybe.
So extend
so it's
the
harder
sentence.
That, or I think, I mean, the original sentiment for me was like 3d6 words or less should be difficult. Maybe we just go to 2d6, but then it doesn't have that cool like 3d6 reference. I don't know.
I think it should be 3d6 words. I think that'll be
Total.
challenging enough.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it sometimes is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're talking about combat, non-combat is, I think, how the topic originally came up as suggested in the Bob World Builder Discord for patrons and YouTube members, where we talk about this stuff a little extra on the side. And it's a great topic. I think I should probably make a video about this at some point too. Having your combat encounters where rather than just trading hit points and damage back and forth, there's something else going on that the party must achieve, must complete or do. as you said earlier. So before we get to the many stories, and actually mostly stories, there were hardly any questions. I don't know if there were any questions actually about this topic. Before we get to those, have we ever had a combat encounter where there was an objective besides fighting?
We sure have. I did one kind of with the Patreon group so it was still kind of about fighting, but
Right. There's a combat going on, but also
like they figured out if they destroyed these 2 obelisks, it would deal damage to the monsters.
Always obelisks.
I like obelisks.
Yeah, well, everybody does. It's the best, I was going to say shape. I don't think that's really the right term. But yeah, so throw an obelisk in your combat.
Yeah,
Easy
just
tip right
throw an
there.
obelisk in there.
Just make it like hum or something.
Yeah.
That'll get the players going.
Be the obelisk.
So what by destroying them, it also did damage to the monster.
Yes.
Okay. And was that the only way to kill it, or did that was the most efficient way, I guess?
So it was like they wouldn't actually drop to 0 hit points until the obelisk was destroyed.
Okay. Cool.
And also it kept them from reforming and hunting the players when they took what the guardians were guarding.
Yeah, because I would say, that reminds me, there was a thing in Icewind Dale that I don't think we actually played in our campaign. I think it was one of the wilderness encounters that I actually ran for patrons as well, where there's a cave of cannibal berserkers who have some kind of, I can't think of the word, but some kind of pedestal with a brazier, I believe, yes, that but made of magical icy fire that somehow is powered by the Frost Maiden, and unless that thing is destroyed, I'm pretty sure killing the berserkers, they'll just come back in a day or something. Some other ones that I thought of that were cool recently in our ongoing Tomb of Annihilation campaign were in the very first session. I ran this one-shot using some of the dinosaur racing rules. So that was honestly more of a race than a combat, but you could also use the dinosaurs to attack each other, and people were doing that a lot. So it was I guess the true objective was trying to win the race, but also fighting this one mysterious racer who had joined the fight, or the race, I should say. And another one that was in our most recent session that I feel like kind of fits into this category was you guys fought a Medusa. And so there's this combat going on, of course, but also this important thing to not do, and that is get petrified.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and I realized I totally screwed that up, by the way.
I thought you did it right.
Well, I just made it way easier than it should have been because okay, so the party had this really good plan where, or I should almost say a player came up with a cool plan where he was going to minor illusion something in his hand over top of a tiny mirror that he had, because in his thieves tools, whatever, there's a small mirror in there. That's the thing. So he goes up to the Medusa, says hey, I'm going to show you this cool flower because she's into flowers. She's totally going along with this, whatever, doesn't have any reason to really doubt him about this specific thing. They were not trusting each other already because they did know this was probably going to lead to something bad. But point is, she looks, he dispels the minor illusion, and I immediately had her roll a save. But the way that I was then running it for you guys, which is correct, is that they're not supposed to roll that save until the start of their turn. So really it should have been some other characters acting, and he still would have been right there when she made the first save. But I had her make the first save right away. So therefore,
I think the way you did it was better because we weren't.
It was better for you guys.
Well, no, we weren't going to engage her until we saw what happened. So we all would have just been
True.
And I wait to see.
Yeah, but by doing that, I skipped a whole turn where she should have made 3 attacks because it's it's at the start of her turn.
Okay,
she just made the save, and then when it actually got to her, it was as if that was her second turn already when I made that roll. And even on that one, I told everybody, oh crap, I rolled a save, and this time it was supposed to be at the end of her turn, and since I rolled it, then I skipped her attacks there. So
well, it just got so complicated anyway.
It was, yeah.
It
I
was,
mean, that's
it was
kind
fine.
of my fault for not checking it beforehand, but literally, because she has like 3 attacks per turn, I missed 6 attacks that she should have made. So that was like, it made her a lot weaker than she should have been. Because the battle, I don't think hardly anybody even got hurt. And the other thing was that when you guys were not looking at her, she should have been having advantage on you every attack that she made. Because it even does say that, like, oh, if they avert their eyes to not look at the Medusa's eyes, they cannot see her during the turn. So it's like, yeah, some major oversights that I might have noticed had I taken any time to prep that day. I had done the prep like before, like a week,
Medusas
like the week prior.
just be like that.
Yeah.
To run.
But she's still with the party, so now if anything wild happens again, I'll know. But that might not happen. We'll see.
Even though I think some of us may have plans to
just assassinate her.
I also tried a race one once that was cut very short by my forgetting that throwing a spear is a thing.
Was this the chase in
the chase. Game? So the characters needed the blood of Malar for something. And he was all like, well, I'm not just going to give you my blood. You have to win it.
Yeah.
So
you don't
he
just
was
give away
like,
your blood.
Let's play a game. I'm going to turn into some prey animals and you can chase me. And if you wound me, so the wording was key. It was, you may strike a single blow and the blood you draw with that wound you can have. Mm-hmm. So it was like, if they used magic, like one of them could cast Eldritch Blast, there wouldn't have been blood. Right. And that would use up their one hit.
Yeah, it'd have to be some kind of like slashing
None of them
spell,
had like bows.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, cool. They don't have range. They're going to have to get up to it. Anyway, the concept was like he was going to change into a bunch of different like cool animals. Each had their different way of dodging and like use the terrain to their advantage, which like, you know, this was an archfey who could like manipulate the terrain. So he was going to make it to his advantage. But then like the one character had a spear and was like, I throw my spear. And I was like, well,
yeah, no reason that shouldn't work, I guess.
There you go.
I mean, as long as he made the attack. Yeah, chases I feel like are the most common, probably alternate objective. You know, because it's usually they're trying to fight the thing, and the thing is fleeing, so it just becomes a combat on wheels, as it were.
Yeah.
Where, you know, you're just kind of imagining movement, or you're doing the very complicated tracking of all that movement. Oh, are they dashing or what? And like how that works. But oftentimes there's just somebody in the party who's really fast. I haven't done a lot of chases myself.
He was turning into a lot of really fast animals, so like no one could really. And then all he was doing was dashing.
Right. In that case, like the odds were in his favor, I would say.
It's just when you're doing this, it is important to think things through of like what the party has at their disposal and how exactly you want it to work. So you're not trying to reference things in the middle of battle. That's the takeaway.
Like the Medusa staff.
Yeah, like the Medusa and throwing the spear. Stuff like that.
Hey, the dinosaur race, though?
Dinosaur race was awesome.
I mean, the rules were real simple.
And we kind of just did whatever we wanted. And it was a little metagamey because we didn't like attack our one party member who was racing.
Yeah.
We were just like,
I mean, it was totally,
but we were trying
definitely metagamey.
It was like low stakes and like no hard feelings because we were all screwing each other over. But it was like not our characters, so it was fine. And we wanted someone else to win anyway.
The players were technically role playing as the jockeys of these dinosaur racers, except one player character who like was technically in the race.
And then at the end of the race, I was like, I'm just gonna run all over across everyone else's lanes. That was my secret move.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm excited about that. Technically, the race rules were in there, but it was a one shot that I wrote, and I'm actually getting the chance to have that like published through a like it's gonna be in a book. So that's gonna be neat. And there'll be information about that, like, down the line. I don't really want to say much now because I don't know if I can.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, that's why you got to listen to this podcast.
Yeah, more people should listen to this podcast.
Yeah. And speaking of just stuff getting published before we get to the break, I thought it'd be cool to mention that, like, hey, on the Patreon right now, at least at the time we're recording this, and there will be one more week after this hits YouTube. There's this cool lockpicking supplement available with rules for how you can incorporate that like during combat. So if there's like, think of this almost as like a bomb, what's the word I'm looking, diffusal scenario where it's like you're just trying to do this like specific thing while a combat's going on. So it's usually going to be this one character taking care of that, like action hero style, creating some rules to make lockpicking more exciting. And, they can be in combat, it can be out of combat. Probably worth checking out, though.
I had one of those, too. A lock picking in the middle of combat.
Okay.
But then the person ended up picking the lock and letting a bunch of other enemies into the... They just picked the wrong door.
Dang, yeah. That just reminded me there's some good stories that involved, like, doors. So why don't we take a tiny break, and then we'll get back to that.
Yeah.
And now it's time for a random encounter, where we roll to read your stories and questions generally about this topic, and the person who wrote our favorite story or question takes home that loot. Grace is flipping off our cat. Oh yeah, speaking of cats, I put this one in here that's not a relevant story or question at all. You already reading it?
Oh, my cat knocked my funky dice off the table so the dog could eat them. Now I have to roll the dog and hope for the best.
I just thought you'd like that.
That's a funny joke.
Yeah. So these first few were just some things that caught my eye. They were generally either not related or they were stories that were technically just a combat or technically just a non-combat, but I'm really looking for these ones that are combat and non-combat combined. And there were still a lot of great suggestions because I made this post and then immediately shared it on the main channel and then also tweeted it. So it got like a lot more attention than these usually do. So there were like 50 comments. I pulled in 12. Usually we're only aiming for like 6 comments. So there's a lot to go through here. But the honorable mentions, if you will, were that one. One where, DM created a situation where the party had to make a bunch of cooking rolls and played music from the Cooking Mama game. Somebody DM'd a campaign that was like a horror summer camp and ended with a climactic battle where the party was like camp counselors just trying to push a giant fiend of some kind into a pit rather than like kill him. And a really cool one that somebody pointed out from a DCC, Dungeon Crawl Classic session, where they had a wizard kind of get pulled into this like archery contest, just like a brief thing with some NPCs. They did well, and then the NPCs, like this was a ruse. They tried to rob the guy, but he pulled off a crazy spell, and it took out like a ton of bandits because he rolled super high. I don't know. It's in the comments. Maybe I'll just copy the comment into the comments of this so other people can read it, because I do think it's worth reading, but I want to get to the on-topic ones too. All right. Jesus.
6. I have to make it make a sound. It's not close enough to the mic.
From @AlfieThornton1040. For a brief description of the setting in our adventure, the party was 6th level and had 3 players. They were trying to solve the mystery behind a pandemic that mysteriously appeared from nowhere and was making the people of the city fall asleep and not be able to wake. Skipping ahead a little bit. The king had a cavity carved into his chest in which this sleep stone, roughly the size of a bowling ball, was embedded. And he said, "Within mere minutes, the stone shall release the final miasma and consume the kingdom." And for this combat encounter, the players had to strategically attack the king so the stone wouldn't crack and release its magic, but attack him so much that he would not be able to fight. This was tricky for the players as they had to think about how much damage they could do and what types of damage, and I hope other DMs who read this would use it to spice up their combat on an occasion.
That is very interesting, because your players can't just go all out wailing on this guy with their best abilities.
Yeah, I really like that one. Like I said, there's a lot of good ones in here, and there are a couple other ones that were related to this, like having to do damage, but in certain ways. So we might see some similar ones, but I think that one was unique because it was the same character that they kind of need to fight, but can't go all out on, like you said.
1.
From Simeon Snow, 6742. You know what? I think these numbers are just generated by YouTube now that it's switched to these like handles, so I'm not going to read all the numbers. I was running a campaign in the SWRPG, I think that's Star Wars system. The party were investigating a terrorist organization that was working in a city. During one of the, maybe it's not Star Wars, during one of the investigations, they showed up to a grand opening of a tech firm in the city that was on bad terms with the terrorists.
Who's on good terms with the terrorists?
Other terrorists.
They're terrorists.
The grand opening was being held at their main office, the tech firm's office, on the 50th floor of a skyscraper. During a showcase of new tech, the terrorists broke in through a window, grabbed the CEO, and jumped out while wearing squirrel suits. The party grabbed some nearby demo jetpacks and followed the terrorists downward. They had to fight the enemy in a downward flying chase. Also complicating matters was that they were using a path through the fireworks to cover their escape. The party had to choose between dealing with the obstacles, fighting, and catching up to the CEO in time before they got to their destination.
Did the squirrel suits have tails?
Probably not. But I like that. You know, it's a chase, but literally just instead of running along the ground, you're like falling out of the sky. That's really neat. And there's also other things coming at you, like that they have to dodge out of the way. And you're not just trying to fight these guys, you're also trying to, you know, sort of rescue this one NPC that's being taken away really fast.
Yeah. I like the visual, like the imagery of like flying through fireworks.
Yeah.
That's cool. But if your squirrel suit had a squirrel tail, that would be very flammable and dangerous.
Yeah, it would. Imagine being a squirrel in a fireworks show.
Can you imagine being a squirrel terrorist during a fireworks show?
That'd be the worst.
CEO? 4.
Samuel Tier. The party IDM were trying to return power to the rightful ruler of a domain of delight. A hag. Oh yeah, this is another one of these like gotta fight him but can't fight him one. A hag had usurped the throne of a moonstone dragon through a clever game of chance and placed a puppet king on the throne. The party's initial goal was to remove the king without killing him, as he was a ward of the party's wizard under an enchantment of the hag. Once they successfully removed the enchantment from him, the hag attacked them. One of the parties found the hag's enchanted ring and put it on. This turned him into the hag's puppet and caused the party to shift battle tactics in order to avoid killing their own party member. It was fun for the puppet player because he could attack his party but without hard feelings, and the party was successful in the end and returned their enchanted companion to his own mind. As a side note, curse rings are also fun because it's so hard for players to not just slip it on.
Mm-hmm. It is hard to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I know in a lot of our games, like, Dan would just always grab stuff that seemed like it was cursed.
Yeah. I guess what is the non-combat?
It was a similar scenario here, where it's like, similar to the first one, right? Where you're fighting. At first it was this NPC. I guess
for me, it's like a non-combat encounter would involve like an object of some kind.
Okay. Yeah.
Or
I mean,
like
this one's
trying
definitely...
to rescue...
This one's still definitely mostly combat.
Yeah.
It's just about how you're fighting this thing, because you don't just want to kill him.
Yeah.
Because first it was a valuable NPC, then their own party member.
5.
In our Pokemon D&D campaign, the player was in a wrestling match with an NPC. One of the main things they had to do was win over the crowd. The player rolled a natural 20 on their entrance performance check and succeeded in doing a cool Ghost Rise, I don't know pro wrestling moves, from the bottom of the ring a la Undertaker. The crowd loved it and was on their side the entire match.
Isn't Undertaker like a truck?
I don't know. I know Gravedigger is a monster truck.
Okay, I'm thinking of Gravedigger.
I have heard of the Undertaker, but yeah, I couldn't tell you. Yeah, so that one's obviously very combat focused as well, but like this mechanic of trying to win over the crowd during some kind of arena style match, I like that too.
Yeah, roll for fancy.
Yeah, and actually, not to keep plugging it here because it's not available yet, but this adventure that I'm writing with the dinosaur race also involved like an arena fight at one point. And as a suggestion from the publisher, they were like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if there were some mechanic for the roar of the crowd? So it's like, I think it just like boosts criticals or something. Because it's like, if they're already doing something cool, the crowd just goes nuts and that like elevates it all. So there's like an extra dice involved or something.
Was that not already involved when we played it?
I don't think so.
No, I think we just happened to do a lot of
I think there was
like,
a lot
cool
of cool
stuff.
things. Yeah, you guys were like just rolling well, I think.
I
during
just
that fight.
yeeted a dinosaur across the arena by dumping all my paladin stuff into it in one hit.
Yeah.
2.
From Nickenquist. I had a combat scene of a gang war in a town square. The gangs were filled with a lot of minions with 10 AC and 1 HP. Super easy to kill and get rid of, but there were also lieutenants and even some powerful bosses. But there were also civilians trapped in the square, so the heroes had to focus on getting them to the edge of the map to save them. At the end of the round, I would roll to determine if more minions showed up, and the players would have to react. All the civilians were represented by red D6s, and each round we would tick them down by 1 number. When the civilian dropped to 1, they died. Too many dead civilians would destroy the PC's reputation in the city, but if the PCs saved the civilians, they would get to keep the dice, and they could add it to any die roll. Honestly, that's one of the few combat scenarios I'm extremely proud of. Everyone moved around and used different tactics, and it was great because everyone was so creative.
I'm about to do something kind of similar to that, actually.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Like a bunch of weak minion cultists and a bunch of civilians slowly being drained of their energy. Gotta kill the things draining them.
Yeah.
Saving civilians is a really good, like, non-combat thing.
I mean, yeah, like that's like a great one. And actually, that's coming up in next month's Patreon thing. So if you missed that lockpicking one, don't worry about it.
Because you have to choose between doing more damage to your enemies and trying to save the civilians that way, or escorting them to safety and prioritizing that.
Right. And I just like the way that this GM handled it with basically like randomly rolling. Think of that, like a pool of D6s. And then kind of whatever they land on is what they land on. And when they get to 1, those civilians are dead. Each round it's ticking down. So you're kind of using them as counter die. But then they also said when you save the civilians, that PC, I guess, or maybe the party gets to choose how it's used. But if they save the D6 of civilians before it reaches 1, then they can add that D6 roll to one of their own rolls. So it's like further incentivizing saving them as well, which I thought was cool.
Yeah, I think the good, like, non-combat encounters are ones that make you make a difficult choice. Because it's like, you can save the civilian, but the bad guy gets away. Or you can kill the bad guy, but his minions murder the civilian.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess in a way by adding the roll, you're like really incentivizing getting the civilians to safety. But I just liked that, how it was not only a counter die, but then also you're adding that die to, like, it just is used in multiple ways. I thought that was really cool. All right.
12.
From Ray Pacheco. I steal a lot from media I enjoy, so I put Sato Kaiba from Yu-Gi-Oh! In one of my campaigns. He hired the adventurers to fight an adult white dragon, with blue eyes of course, so he could capture it in a card. They had to fight the dragon without killing it. So this is, another one very similar to before, where it's like, you gotta fight him, but without it running away and making sure it was weak enough to be captured. They succeeded barely.
Pokemon. You gotta whittle down the Pokemon.
Actually, and that's what that reminded me of.
You gotta get it into yellow. What I want to know is, did they try using any status elements on the dragon to make it easier to capture? Because it's like, if they put it to sleep, would that have worked?
I don't remember how Yu-Gi-Oh! Works.
That's not, that's not how Yu-Gi-Oh! But like, it's
yeah.
basically the same principle as Pokemon, and like they were trying to capture this monster by lowering its hit points. But like,
just straight up capturing it by like paralyzing it would be the something. If you got those capabilities.
I guess I don't know how the cards in this situation work.
All right.
But if I were running it, that's how I would have done it.
So number 10 is from Drew GB. I run an easy D6 game. Shout out to DM Scotty. Low fantasy game. I used the Merry Mushman's Folklore Bestiary. The player's goal was to hunt/capture, and this one's different, trust me. Hunt/capture what's known as the Dahu goat, a Swiss Alps magical goat that after you've seen it once and you look away, it becomes invisible to you and you'll never see it again. It also has 2 legs shorter on one side, so it will circle the mountain without falling. So, cool mythical creature. The objective was to capture it. The players decided to scare it by blowing a horn, so it would topple down the mountainside. But wouldn't you know it, attracted the griffin that they knew was nearby circling. It led to the player trying to catch a rolling magical goat down a hill and another fleeing from a griffin on the side of the mountain. They couldn't lose sight of the Dahu goat or it would be invisible and they may never find it again. So they were trying to escape with it, running with it on their shoulders while staring at it the whole time and escaping/fighting a griffin, a hilarious heist, hunt, thrilling combat, and escape counter while staring at the goat the entire time.
That does sound very fun, but did you remember to give the griffin advantage on all its attacks because all the characters were looking at the goat?
Well, yeah, exactly. Right? Because this is the anti-Medusa battle.
Oh, but this was
at...
easy D6 though, so...
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I don't know what the rules are for a creature like that. I mean, honestly, I don't think it had rules for this creature. It sounded like they were using some other third-party supplement, the Merry Mushman's Folklore Bestiary, which sounds kind of interesting. It's got a bunch of goofy creatures like this.
Yeah, when it first said, like, if you look away, it becomes invisible, I was afraid it was going to be like a false Hydra situation, but this is more fun and cool to me. I think false Hydras are too edgy.
Yeah, straight up, I don't even know, like, what that is. All I know is my boy, Dungeon Dad, Josiah, is the one who, like, made the huge video about it.
Oh, sorry.
And I've never actually even seen it.
Sorry, Josiah.
Oh, what do you say? They're overrated or something?
I think they're too edgy.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I bet he agrees. And isn't it like not even a D&D monster?
It's not an official
like a
monster
magic thing or something. I don't know. Anyway, maybe we should make a podcast episode about that because apparently it's very popular.
Yeah.
9. From Jeeves, totally normal combat. But the chamber had 3 doors, and any time a door went 3 consecutive turns without someone jiggling the handle, it shrank by half. These doors, once combat was over and they were unlocked, led out of the dungeon, led to a massive loot stash, and led through a portal that took them back to the beginning of the combat. You'll never guess which door they chose first.
The loot one?
That I don't know. They don't say. I assume it's the loot one.
No, I'm guessing they chose the combat one and had to start over.
Maybe. Because they probably just didn't understand the combat right away. And then they would have had to maybe like squeeze through. I don't know. I just find this very interesting. Like shrinking exits or entrances to where you need to go. That's another cool kind of timer to throw in your combats.
That is pretty neat. That kind of reminds me of the trap where it's like a button and there's a countdown. And like the lower the countdown gets, there's like red flashing lights and like an alarm sounding.
Yeah.
And then it's like
Z-Bashu.
You press the button and the countdown resets. But if you press the button a certain number of times, like it explodes or something. And
I don't even remember if it was that. The whole point was that they're not supposed to push it.
That's
right?
what I'm
that's
saying.
How you get out.
If you keep pushing it, like there's eventually consequences. But if you don't push it,
right, that
disengages whatever the trap is.
Exactly.
And unlocks the door.
Yeah, doors. And then one more from somebody who's not eligible for the giveaway because unfortunately we just keep this in the U.S. because legal reasons. But I thought this was a pretty cool one. They had a fight, cultist stuff going on. It's classic, like get the MacGuffin, as they even say it in their comment here. But the MacGuffin emitted some wave of energy that teleported everyone within 50 feet of it to a random location, but in the same position relating to each other. In parentheses, we were using Owlbear Rodeo, so it was easy just switching the maps while the tokens were exactly where they were. The players had to fight inside an active volcano, underwater, while falling miles above the ground and in the middle of a jungle infested with dangerous beasts. The artifact teleported everyone again, including new enemies found at the locations after a round or when it was struck by something. If someone wasn't within 50 feet of it when it went off, they were left behind. So it became less a fight and more of a king of the hill match, where the players were desperately trying to stay in the range of the artifact while keeping enemies outside. The highlight was definitely a shark ripping a cultist in half and getting teleported into a jungle with everyone. After 4 rounds of teleporting, having either killed or left behind all the cultists, they finally came back to the starting location. The shark was still there, though, and the druid had to polymorph it into a snail so they could release it back into the ocean. It somehow became a recurring character.
Cool.
Yeah, and I just thought that one was a very clever use of, like, capitalizing on the VTT by swapping out maps, like, right under your tokens. So, wanted to make sure that got in this episode. But, we're running out of time. So, for sharing our favorite story/question, this episode's loot winner is Drew GB with the disappearing Dahu goat that is the anti-Medusa encounter that I will have to try incorporating into my own game. See how it works as the reverse of a Medusa.
You have to look at it at all times.
You're going home with a mystery set of dice from Only Crits. Woo! If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend and debate that like button.
Try to show it how smart you are.
To be eligible for loot and support this show, consider subscribing or joining through Patreon through the links below. Patrons also get a private RSS link to listen to your favorite podcast platform and these awesome resources like the lockpicking thing and next month's adventure with a bunch of random non-combat combat encounters during a combat. Check it out. Thank you for your support and keep building.
Stop building. Amen.